Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. My guest is one of Broadway's brightest new stars. He is known for playing Bach in the musical Wicked, and now he is the new official Evan in one of Broadway's biggest musical hits, Dear Evan Hansen. Please say hello to Zachary Noah Piser.
Hi,
How are you?
I am good. I'm enjoying the sun on this day, although I guess it's colder outside, but it looks pretty.
It's so strange. Well, I've got my Evan blue on.
Yes, you do. You're better than me. You're a walking ad for the show.
Well, someone has to be. No, but like I said, you are so terrific. Like I said, I haven't seen you in this new incarnation of your new run as the official Evan, but I've seen you before and you are dynamite, my friend, just so you know.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
So, first of all, how are you and where are you?
I am doing really well. I am in Queens. I live in Astoria. I've been here since pretty much I moved to the city. And I am doing really well. I'm like learning about this new position and figuring things out, but overall, just leading with so much gratitude and excitement.
Okay, you are back on Broadway as the official Evan. How excited are you? Like, what's going through your mind?
I think my dad's reaction, because they were actually able to come and see my first, official full-time show, his reaction said it all. He, as you're familiar with the show, so we have that last kind of scene in the orchard with Zoe, and then we have that last closing monologue that ends with so much hope for Evan. And then we have this beautiful moment where we take a big, deep breath in, and then we close our eyes and we look forward to the future. And my dad, who's seen the show before, he saw it in Toronto when I was up there, and saw it on Broadway before, as you did in the last incarnation. He knows pretty much play by play of the show. And before the lights went out, he was standing up and screaming, just like screaming so loudly, maybe a little bit inappropriate to do, but we let him have a pass because he is, after all, my father. But that kind of unbridled emotion and passion and excitement is exactly how I feel and felt taking that first bow, and I've felt since taking that first bow.
I love that your dad did that. I mean, I think that's
Oh my
really,
gosh.
really.
He has a track record pretty much for all the shows. The same thing happened at Wicked, where as when I had my first entrance as Bach, we had this little cute like run on onto the stage. He just started screaming, and what else can you do but just kind of say, okay, you know what? That's my dad. That's what he's gonna do, and we love him for it.
You're like, he's mine. That man standing up there, he's mine.
Yes, I don't think anybody on any of those stages had any doubt of the relationship there. I think they were like, "Oh, that was your parents, weren't it?" And I was like, "Yes, that was. Cannot hide it. Cannot deny it."
Okay, we have to talk about what was it like going back into rehearsals again? I mean, since the shutdown, first everybody thought it was going to be a 2 week shutdown, a 4 week shutdown. I mean, many people went through so much, but now being back, in a rehearsal room with people again, with your dear Evan Hansen family, what was that like?
It was. I was just talking about this. It was such a wild assortment of feelings. It was overwhelming. It was, dare I say, magical, but also it was really nerve wracking. We all were finally back in this room, doing the thing that we've been craving to do so much. And everyone had their own little projects that were really exciting that happened throughout the pandemic. But it was the first time we were in the room reunited as a family, and that's what this show centers around with the actors, making sure that we're all so tight knit together. And because I feel like without that, the show isn't as powerful. And so there was it was so heartwarming being in that room again. But at the same time, we couldn't deny the fact that we had all experienced these last 2 years of trauma and all those feelings that come with the pandemic that were new feelings for all of us, and we couldn't deny that it couldn't be the exact same as it was before, for better or for worse. But I think our team did a really good job of kind of centering us the first day we got into the room and kind of acknowledging that. We weren't just saying, "Oh, it's just like it was before March 12th, 2020," or yeah, 2020. We were acknowledging that we were kind of entering new territory, the same show, but new territory with one another. And I really, really was happy that the team did that, because it set the tone in such a beautiful way to start this new process, almost like a new chapter of this beautiful story.
What was the feeling like walking back into the Music Box Theater for the first time?
It that was it was like opening, what's that word? It's like opening like a time capsule. Like, or like, you put those things in the ground when you're a kid and then you dig it up 10 years later. It felt like that. It was like time, so much had changed over the last 2 years, but the building like magically stayed the same in so many ways. It was so eerie. Like I walked into my dressing room and was like, oh my God, there are those gummy worms that I left there, and I forgot that I left there, and they were now like, rock hard like sugar candy. But it was also just so amazing to see that in fact, life had gone on, but this sacred place still remained intact. I thought maybe we would walk in there and it'd be, I don't know, totally empty, or everything would be moved out. But, all the things like we didn't have any spoiled milk or any drinks or anything like that were gross in there. But everything else had remained intact. And there was something that was so special about opening those doors again.
Because I spoke to Rob McClure from Mrs. Doubtfire, and he said he unlocked his dressing room door and he had bought his young daughter two new outfits, and she had totally outgrown them. By the time he went back in there, I was like, oh my gosh, she's 2 years older now.
Yes, I think we all maybe had a little bit of that feeling with our own costumes too, of like, ooh, our bodies have shifted and changed over the last 2 years. That's so funny.
So, besides your dad getting up that first performance, like before the show even ended, what do you remember about like how magical? And I love using that word because that's a Richie Ridge word. I mean,
I
these,
love
but these things are really special. I mean, being on Broadway and doing shows and returning, they are magical. What do you remember about that first performance back, like being in the wings before and everything else?
Oh yeah. I mean, people ask me if I still get nervous to do the show because I've been with the family for a bit of time, and the truth is, absolutely, I still get nervous of thinking because it's such an iconic role. It's such a hefty role, the story that we tell. So before Waiting in the Wings, we always do a little bit of a huddle up, the cast that night, and I just remember really looking every single one of my fellow actors in the eye and just feeling like my heart rate going up, but then it kind of settling in, seeing everyone being so supportive. And I remember walking onto the stage, the PSM who was working on the deck that night, Judy. She's like a second, third mom for me in the city. She always says before the start of the show to me, she always says, have a good day at school. Like, have a first good day of school. And that is such a special moment for me because it reminded me of all the times that I did it beforehand, before the pandemic. And I walked onto that stage and just opened that computer, and the audience was so loving and so warm. That was a moment that I will never forget. And throughout that, sometimes it feels like it's a blur. Like you kind of open that computer and you say you're Evan Hansen, and then the time that you like regain consciousness is like the bow. But I was a little bit more aware this time around of just how awesome it was to be there, to be back on that stage and sharing that story with the audience. There are a lot of moments that I remember from that, but yeah, the top and the bottom were definitely parts that I will never forget from that night.
You have quite a history with this show. I mean, tell our audience. I mean, my gosh, where did it all begin?
Yeah, so I mean, I was fortunate enough to join the Dear Evan Hansen family for the international premiere in Toronto back in 2019. I served as the alternate up there. I was so excited to go up to Toronto. I grew up in California. I am American, but I got the call that said, "Would you want to travel a little bit up north to do the premiere of the show?" And I was like, let me check yes, 100%. Are you kidding me? I would love to do this. And I was up there through the entirety of that run. That was so lovely. And I have the Toronto, and that original Toronto cast has such a special place in my heart. And then I got the magical call that they wanted me to transfer to Broadway as the alternate. And that was at the end of 2019. And then, of course, that whole thing happened that we all experienced, that we dare not say the word that happened. And then we returned to the show. But it's because of the pandemic, it really does feel like this show has been it feels like, and it has been such an integral part of the last like chunk of my life, this last chapter. And to be able to have the opportunity to step fully into the role is I don't know. I can't really express into words how meaningful it is to me. But there's a newfound sense of gratitude of being able to be on that stage and specifically share this story, which I know is so important and so meaningful to so many people, including myself, including my family. Um, it's just, even though it's something that I'm familiar with and it lives so deep in my bones, it is like I'm looking at it in a totally different way this time around.
I love that. You started to talk about this. What does it mean to you personally to be the first Asian American actor to play Evan?
That is a great question, and I will cry. No, I won't cry. It's the small and the big things. Small things being the messages that I will receive from fans and friends, family members, or friends of family members saying, um, I didn't think it was possible for me to see someone who looks like me on a Broadway stage, period, much less in a role like this that wasn't necessarily written for, an Asian person to play. And those small things add up to be really, really important things for me as someone who then gets to tell this story and realizes that it has a profound effect, a ripple effect thereafter. But on a broader scale, I always say that representation, we've heard that word so much, representation, diversity. I like representation. To me, that means seeing people who look like you on a stage or a screen. It can be a big screen, it can be a small screen, big stage, small stage, commercial, whatever it is, anywhere, everything in between. And in that small act of seeing someone who looks like you, whatever it is, whatever facial features, whatever skin color it is that you associate with as being part of your own identity, that then means that your voice and your body and your skin color and those traits that aren't normally portrayed on such a wide scale are being seen and are being valued and are being heard. And it was really through this show specifically because I was also, in Wicked too, I had the same kind of experience as being the first Asian American to play that role on Broadway. This is such a different show and a different experience because it addresses topics that are really hard to talk about for all communities. But to be able to be a part of that for this community, this specific show, it's really hard to put into words just how meaningful and significant it is to me.
Yeah.
Um, Somewhere around there, something like that.
I love that. Well, let's get into Bach and Wicked. Like I said,
Oh, yeah.
again, that must have been so incredible to be a part of that phenomenon
Oh,
called
yes.
Wicked. Like you're going to be the new Bach.
That when I got that call, I like totally blacked out. I remember I was calling my parents, and my parents, God bless them, they're both tone deaf. They are not in my field, in our field in any way. And when I told them that I wanted to try to do this with my life, they were like, "Yes, okay, we support you. Let's see what happens. That sounds good to me. Let's try." And then when that happened, when I got that call, I called them and I told them, and they thought it was a joke. They thought I was pranking them. They were like, "Okay, seriously, honey, like I'm at work, like I gotta go." And I was like, "No, no, you're not understanding. Like I just got this call from this number, and unless it's a prank to me, I think that I'm gonna be doing this thing." And then it was just a whole out scream fest. And the entire time I was at the Gershwin Theater, I just couldn't believe this my stars. Like I couldn't believe it. And the same thing has happened here with this show for the reasons that we just talked about, for representation, but also just for me personally to be given this opportunity to step into this role to lead a show is just so insane and exciting and believable, but unbelievable at the same time for me in so many ways.
Do you remember your first performance on stage in Wicked? That's a
Oh
huge
yeah,
show.
oh yeah. The entire thing of I was there for almost 2 years, from start to finish. I was so in awe of the performers around me. I mean, I would just watch, of course, like the Elphabas and the Glindas are so iconic, but I would watch the dancers. Like there were so many moments in Ozdust, and there's this beautiful moment like in the something bad where that or not something bad, but there's a dance where, oh, I can't give anything away here, I realize that, but there's this beautiful dance where the shiz students are possessed for a moment. and by Elphaba's doing. And it was just immaculate. The dancers, the quality, the passion that they brought to that. I was so continually inspired by all the performers in that show at any day. And yeah, for that to be my real big first kind of, I mean, it was my Broadway debut in the city. Uh, it was really thrillifying, if I can say.
I want to talk about fans because you really can't see the fans the way we used to, but hopefully that'll happen really soon.
Yes.
Dear Evan Hansen has touched millions of people. People have flown in from all around the world to see this show. They've seen it in London, like I said, Toronto and New York. Why do you think this show touches fans so much? And do you have a favorite fan moment or someone who's been touched by your performance in this show?
Yeah. So this show is so singular because it's a show that connects and relates to everyone. Everyone at one point has been a child of a parent. People might have siblings. People might be a parent, looking and have kids. Not everyone has to have a very specific connection in that sense in terms of mental health with this show to be able to relate to this show. The relationships in the show are something that is so universal that everyone can connect with. And I think that's why it's so successful, because it speaks to not just one generation, but to all generations, wherever you are in your life. And the truth is, I've never met someone, especially in the theater world, but outside the theater world, who hasn't at one point felt like an outsider. And oh boy, do I feel that. I feel Evan so hard in those first days of school for middle school for me. Whew, that was not a fun time for little Zach Piser. It was not a good time for me. And whenever I think about those moments, I realize that everyone, in the audience, wherever they are in their life, has probably at one point or might at that moment be feeling like an outsider, like they don't belong. And that feeling, because it's so universal, is, I think, the reason why it continues to be such a hit, because people really connect with the story.
I
And
love,
yeah, and a
yeah,
fan, I mean,
yeah.
I every single day I'm blown away by the reactions to the show, to me, literally every single day. So I don't know if I have a singular favorite one. Um, Specifically, I had actually a lot of family members in Toronto who were AAPI, and it really was awakening for me to kind of realize that's where I first really understood that there is that ripple effect when someone who looks like someone else, who isn't like kind of your normal, whatever, conventional performer, gets to kind of be that person for those audiences. I kind of got to witness that firsthand with my family. And that was a very, very kind of like interesting, weird, but overall beautiful experience. That's just one example, but really every single day I'm so blown away by the positive reactions.
Yeah. I love that your Evan Hansen is your own. And I
Yeah.
think that's really special. Was that a Michael Greif? Did you have conversations with your director about
Cool.
making your Evan your own? It's
Yeah.
Zach's
You
Evan.
know, that's a really, really, really great question, and I respect the team so much for that sentiment exactly. I think all the people who have played this role, I think, are so wildly, spectacularly talented, and that's the thing that connects all of us. I think that everyone has that, whatever that is, but I think the team does such a beautiful job of letting us find our own version and find our own window into the character. I think that's so important. When I first joined the company, I was hoping that that would be the case, and was so pleasantly surprised when that in fact was what they were going for. They said, you should, this is where we want to aim for. This is what we're thinking about. This is the story. This is where Evan lives. The way you get there, the way you decide to get there, the way that you feel your way there, we will let you kind of create that journey, and we'll help you on your way there. But from the beginning, from the first table work, from those rehearsals, it was always an open conversation, especially coming back to it back now in 2021 at a 2021. I love those conversations and the table work that we got to really dive into, because it just opens up that window to really make it your own and to feel like you have ownership of the character when you're playing the part.
I think every show has done that, which is really, really special. Coming back after the pandemic, it was like we're starting fresh. This is
Yes.
a whole new now. Everyone's gone through so many different feelings and emotions, and I think they're like, let's just start now. How are we viewing, Dear Evan Hansen? How are we seeing Moulin Rouge? How are we seeing this show? And I think it makes such a difference.
Yeah, well, I mean, Richard, I think that it really was necessary after the last 2 years and the reckoning and the awakening that happened within the theatrical community and at large. I think it really was necessary to have those conversations, and I was so excited that our team was not only game to kind of just dip their toes in, but really was ready to they were ready to rip it apart and put it back together with the people in the room. Not that anything obviously has changed. It's still the show that we all know and love. But even if it was just to create discourse around those topics, I know for me and for a lot of the cast members, that was so invaluable to help us, as you said, kind of create a window into making these characters more part of us, as we perform them.
It's been very cathartic for me going back to the theater. It's something I've loved since I was a kid. And like I said, I cry during these shows now. I mean, I feel like I'm seeing them for the very first time. I'm having these incredible out of body experiences at all these shows, like I'm seeing them for the very first time. And I've seen Dear Evan Hansen like 12 times. And I sit there and I've got
12 times?
new
Are you
experiences.
okay? Are you okay? 12
12
times?
times. I've
Wow.
seen all of you do this.
Wow.
Yeah, I want to go back to growing up. How did seeing a touring production of Fiddler on the Roof change your life?
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you pulled that out. Where did you get that from? Look, so my parents, as I said, they are, I love my parents. They are tone deaf, but they are patrons of the art and of the arts. So when I was a kid, I always say that I was such a late theatrical bloomer, especially to performing. Mostly because I just didn't think it was possible for someone who looked like me to do that for a living. And as I said, I didn't really grow up in a theatrical or an artsy house. But my parents, from a very early age, and when they moved to San Francisco before they had me, were drawn to San Francisco because of the art mecca that it is. Part of the reason why they came also for work. So they had those, tickets to Best of Broadway of all the touring shows that came around. And when I was born, soon after when I was able to go to the shows to reach the age limit, they would bring me along. And the first show that I saw was Fiddler on the Roof. And the folklore goes that at the end of the show, when they were bowing, I was kicking and screaming the person ahead in front of me, like happily screaming. And I was like, encore, let's do it all over again. Why can't it? Let's just do it over, as if it was just, one of my tapes that I was watching, whatever. And my parents think that that's really where I caught that theatrical bug. But the truth is that I really didn't start performing, training and whatever until really the end of high school, when I had some incredible mentors in high school that said, hey, you might have something here, and if you want to pursue it, we are here to support you. And really, that's where I feel like I caught the theatrical performing bug, if you will. But from a very early age, we always enjoyed listening to music, listening to soundtracks in our household, and going to see as many shows as we could.
So was that the defining moment, or was there a defining moment when you said, I want to be an actor or try to be an actor to try to make a living at this? That's a
Wow.
big question.
I would say, and you're going to laugh at me for this, as everyone does, but I think the most formative theatrical experience for me was in my senior year of high school in California. I grew up in the Bay Area. There was a junior production of, you guessed it, Les Miserables. And I was, you guessed it, Jean Valjean. I always like to say that I was and am probably the shortest Jean Valjean that has ever been. I will send you photos of the wig because they're something. But we wore them. But I always say that was kind of the most transformative and informative experience for me to it was the most transformative and informative experience for me performing, because I really realized in that moment that I had a lot of other interests as a kid. I loved to be a student. I swam, which is so funny because I'm so short now, but I love to swim. Um, but that was really when I realized that there was nothing else that I could do that would give me that feeling of performing in front of a sea of strangers, or a sea of family, friends, and strangers. There was just nothing that could even come close to achieving that feeling.
Is there a classic dream role from a classic musical that you're like, yeah, I want to tackle that? Or you listen to like the CD over and over and like, I'm going to play that role?
Um, there are so many roles. Yes, absolutely. In the future, there are so many things I want to do, which would include probably doing another version of Jean Valjean, just with better wigs, hopefully. Way back, way in the future. But right now, my biggest dream is, after playing such an iconic role like Evan, I think my biggest dream is to originate a new show. Something that is of the same importance, and weight as this character. Maybe not the same kind of story, but that has always been a dream of mine, to originate a new show. So putting that out there in the universe for that to happen.
That is great. Well, finally, if you could sum up the best part of the experience, and I'm sure there's so many of being a part of Dear Evan Hansen, what's it been for you? Because you're an inspiration to so many people who are going to a theater for the very first time. And like you said, seeing someone who looks like you, say, oh my gosh, he does that, I can do that.
Yeah, I think it's hard to suss it down to like one singular thing, but I think that sentiment really hits it on the head. This role was a dream of mine when I first heard about the show way back when. And to be able to do it for such a broad audience on Broadway, um, is something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. And the connections that I've made in the theater as well are things that I hold so true to my heart. But the most significant part of this experience for me has been the connection with the fans and with the outside world, and hearing those stories of saying, I saw myself in you and in this portrayal, and I didn't think that was possible, because as I said to you, that was me when I was a kid. I think I could probably count on less than one hand, the number of AAPI leads that I saw on TV and on a stage for the touring stages when they would come through. And that is a gift that I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay for this show, in terms of being able to do that and pass that down and give that experience to younger, older, whatever generations that it is, that includes. That's something that is probably the most meaningful to me for this show.
Well, that is terrific. Well, once again, Zachary Noah Piser is Broadway's newest Evan in the hit musical Dear Evan Hansen. Zachary, thanks for joining me. This has been a dream to sit with you.
Yay, thank you so much for having me.
This is so great. Everyone, stay safe, and we'll see you at the theater. Take care, everyone.